What's up, guys? Welcome back to Table Full of Knives, the Ridge Runner Blades podcast. This is part 2 with Joe Flowers. If you haven't watched part 1, go back and watch that one first. We're at beautiful Blue Ridge Ranch in Ferguson, North Carolina. Big shout out to them for letting us film here. We're going to pick back up right off in episode 1, talking about who influenced you in your career.
Oh, yeah. So, right off the bat, we're in the Southeast, like this wonderful location here in the Appalachians. And a really prominent knife maker out of the Southeast would be Dogwood Custom Knives, Dan Eastland, who I first met way back in the day when I was on the Equip to Endure podcast and videos. A big one of the big YouTubers back in the day, and I met this gentleman Dan from Dogwood Custom Knives, and I didn't hate him. He's actually a really awesome guy, quite a chef and a very knowledgeable knife maker. Used to make furniture, Taylor, way back in the days. Yeah, woodworker. So he's dabbled in a bunch of different things. He came with me on one of my first jungle expeditions, and sure as heck, he's coming on his 9th one. We lost count. We stopped counting, but he's coming again this year. He's an incredible knife maker, really knows how to do some really amazing grinds on knives, and is very, very technical about what he lets out of his shop. A factory second to him is something that we could probably sell for $300.
Yeah.
And he was very influential, especially in teaching me how and what goes behind the design. Not just, okay, this is how to do it on paper. He's like, no, Joe, you're coming down to my shop. We're going to grind out some knives and make some knives. And my grind lines are horrible compared to his. Man, that really, taught me something about how bad I am at the actual grind lines and things like that. But he's definitely a very significant influence in my life for knife making in general and knives in general. Whenever there's like a new steel out, I'm like, Dan, is this Magna Cut for real, or what's the deal? He's like, yeah, it is, except, like 600 belts later, you're going to have fun with it. But Dan Eastland, don't you guys sell Dan Eastland at Ridge Runner?
Dogwood. Yep, we have a couple in stock. Dan does something to his knives that I have never seen another knife maker do. On Micarta,
he licks them. No,
not that. No, I was at Dan's shop for the Knife Makers Guild meeting a couple of months ago, and I watched him hand file his shape on his.
Oh yeah, he's handles. All about that.
I have never seen anyone do that on Micarta. I've seen it on wood, getting a rough shape, but he wants it to be like perfectly ergonomical in the hand, so he uses files. It's the coolest thing I've seen.
Some funny stories about Dan. We've been to the jungle a bunch, and to have a knife maker in an area where there's all this exotic hardwood, it'll wear you out because he wants that one. And so like me and Alberto will have to sit there and hack for like a half hour through bloodwood, which is a really freaking hard metal. Or wood, it eats metal. It literally eats metal. And sure enough, Dan will come down and try some Frankenstein stuff on some of his knives. So he's like, Joe, he made this out of LT 20N 2930. I don't know which number. And we'll take huge chunks out of it, be like, okay, this one's crap. Next. And we're like, Dan, you just put like 3 hours on that blade. And sure enough, he doesn't care. He just wants to know the functionality of it. So that's an incredible feature for him too.
So we, Joe and myself camp.
We're out in the wild right now, so we're getting technical difficulties with the wind pushing the mic. You might hear that on the dead cat, coming up, but it's good to go.
So me and Joe camp with Dan.
Oh yeah,
a couple times a year.
Oh, it's the camp gluttony. Yeah, honestly,
we eat so much food. It's knife makers, knife people, and chefs.
Chefs. So he makes chef knives, right? But honestly, I'm hiring Dan for some foodie related trips down in the jungle later because he's such a good chef. God, you feel so huge coming out of that camp thing.
First time I went, I asked you what the food deal was, and I'm
I was saying, don't bring any.
I'm always taking sandwiches and granola and pretzels, and he's like, don't bring anything, and I'm like, that's a little sketchy. And then I show up, and there's like a chef making like a 6-course dinner. We got lunch on the grill, and it's a lot different than normal camping, but. So me and Joe have went on a couple adventures, and we were camping with Dan, ran out of ice, had to run to town, and it is in the middle of nowhere in South Carolina.
Like, this is real middle of nowhere.
Like,
I know the
out.
middle of nowhere. This was one of them.
And we went into town in Ware Shoals, and there's not a lot there. There was like a Dollar General and a Piggly Wiggly. So in the South, there's a grocery store called the Piggly Wiggly. It's super small. But we went there, we got our ice, we hopped back in Joe's Subaru, we're getting ready to leave, and someone starts knocking on the window of the car.
Meanwhile, I'm like grabbing my
we're reaching for stuff
side.
because we don't know what's going on. And he rolls the window down, and we hear, "Are you Joe Flowers?"
I was like, with Taylor, I'm like, yeah, you see that, right? I was recognized. Look, tell my wife I got seen out in the middle of nowhere.
He denies being a celebrity, but even in the darkest corners of South Carolina, people know who Joe Flowers is.
That could be a bad thing, though. That could be very bad. And in my defense, I was wearing a big Condor shirt, so I think that was it. But he knew me like Dan from the Equipped to Endure days and stuff too. And honestly, we could sit here and talk about myself or whatever, but that was quite honestly maybe the second time I've ever been like recognized in public. And I was glad someone was there to see it, because that way I didn't look like I was making it up. And of course, then we went back there and proceeded to eat like half a deer and all this other wonderful stuff. Man, I've eaten a lot of crazy stuff in the jungle. I love reptiles. Like I said, I'd be a full-time herpetologist, but my friends, I like knives, I like Godzilla, I like Jeeps, all that. My other friends, they're like straight up snakes. Just, hey, dude, what's up, snakes? And that's all they do. So I love reptiles and amphibians. And Dan Eastland of Dogwood Custom Knives and I have ate whatever proper grammar that is, crocodilians in the past down in the jungle and other places. But on our last trip, he straight up got a farm raised alligator and wrapped the whole thing in bacon.
Yeah, that was Chef Ralph.
Oh, that's right. That was Ralph.
Brought
yes,
the alligator wrapped in bacon and smoked it. And man, that was
good. My gosh, I was sweating alligator juice by the end of it. So bacon can really fix anything. Like, I love reptiles and amphibians, but I was ready to put the alligator back on the endangered species again after eating that, which doesn't happen. Alligators are an incredible conservation story. And long story short, I could thank Crocodile Dundee for getting me into knives, because here's a dude who loves reptiles, who's always out in the bush, who's really hilarious to talk to. But as like a 10-year-old, I must have worn out that VHS tape watching Crocodile Dundee a lot. So that, onto that influence question from part one, I tell a lot of people that I really watched Crocodile Dundee a lot when I was a kid, but I don't think that really covers it, because I like whittled a Bowie knife out of wood to have and run around the creeks with and pretend I was Crocodile Dundee with. If only I had bacon at that time.
Do you have any crazy jungle stories you can tell us? Anything crazy ever happened down there?
Oh gosh, yeah.
Anything legal and crazy?
Yeah, well, they're all pretty much legal, pretty much. Well, we can talk about machete safety and knife safety. If you bushcraft a table, right? Like, you have these like long sticks, and then you have them on two little forks, and you have like a table made out of sticks. Watch the spacing between the saplings, the long pieces of wood, because I had a Tops Knives Joe Flower design Brachimo that I put on the table, and sure enough, it went right through two of the spaces and straight down into my foot. And I've never seen like a constant ejection of blood before, of like a spurt. And sure enough, it was right there. I thought somebody turned like a faucet on, and it was a tiny cut, but it just hit that vein perfectly. And I had to, of course, wrap it up, and I couldn't go spearfishing that night. So that's one. There's a lot of Joe drops a knife on his foot stories out in the jungle too, which is probably why I shouldn't be wearing Crocs as much as I do. But one time I was supposedly stalked by a jaguar and didn't even know it. So I was with this Yukuna guide and we were out monkey hunting. He's allowed to monkey hunt. I'm not, as an indigenous, and I was just watching him. And we're out there, we're looking around. He's like, it's strange. There's no monkeys around. I think there's a big predator. And I'm like, oh, okay. Because he likes to joke with me a lot. And all of a sudden he stops and he goes, did you hear that? And of course, Gringo Joe, I'm like, what? I hear a toucan. He goes, that toucan's doing a alert call. And he goes, here, get behind this bush and take out your machete because this blowgun won't do anything. And I'm like, seriously. I thought he was messing around with me at one point. And he goes, no, watch this. And he takes this leaf and he makes this like a funnel, kind of looks like a Frito chip. And he makes this like squeaking sound of like an animal in distress. And I kid you not, the entire jungle goes dead quiet. And it's never quiet down there, especially with me around. But the jungle goes dead quiet, like somebody put a blanket on. And so he goes, all right, it's around here. That's why the jungle's quiet. I'm going to try and call it over. And I'm like, oh, okay. Turned on my GoPro because I'm ready to see something before I get, maimed. And he calls it and he calls it. And then he waits for a while. And then like a blanket, the blanket's taken off and it gets loud again. He goes, oh, it smelled us. And it didn't like us. So it went around. I'm like, Alberto, you're full of it, dude. Come on, man. Because I've known him for like a decade now. And I'm like, prove it. And he goes, oh, yeah. Okay, cool. Come over here. And he goes and he shows me our track. And there's a jaguar paw in the track. So behind us, he'd been trailing us. And he goes, he smelled us or she smelled us. He thinks it was a female or something. And it did a U shape around us and went along its way because it didn't want to mess with humans. And so we get back to camp. I still think it's a prank that he pulled on me, but not. And then he's talking in Spanish to another guy. He goes, oh, it was either this or duende. And I was like, oh, I know what a duende is. Is he serious? And I asked Goran, the guy who we talked about in part one. It was like, the duende. He's like, yeah, man, they talk about duende all the time. It's a forest gnome. He goes, it was either the jaguar or el duende, the forest gnome, which is like this forest spirit. And I was like, why does he think it was a duende? He's like, you didn't notice how clean the ground was all around you? And I was like, no, I didn't. He's like, well, the duende picked up around that area. So that's why they think it was so mysterious. And I didn't know that. It was a super, super weird situation. So I never saw the jaguar. I saw some proof of it. Definitely never saw the duende. But that was an eerie time. I've never heard the jungle go quiet. And that was a special time for me. I got it all on GoPro, but it's like the most unsatisfying video, as with most, UFO things and all that. It's the most unsatisfying video whatsoever because you just see me huddled with a machete and then Alberto beatboxing with a Frito looking leaf, trying to call an animal in. So leaf. Yeah, man, I was with Alberto one time. And he's like, Joe, I don't feel like looking for an insect. And so he whittles off a callus off of the bottom of his foot, just along the heel, and puts it on a hook and goes about catching a piranha, chops that up, and then catches another piranha. Who knew we had natural bait on our feet the entire time?
That's gross.
Yeah, super, super crazy stuff. And then, I could go on, guys, forever about stories. But I'm going to try and keep some morals in on this. It takes two people to cut themselves. I learned this from a cabinet guy. So this is, I say this a lot. I need to get some new jokes, but, it takes two people to cut themselves, experts or beginners. And, everybody in between seems to be okay. I was with, this Brazilian bushman who was down there and, being a wilderness, I took wilderness, first responder with Essie Knives about 3 years ago. And so I got a lot of first aid stuff. And of course I was geeking out on all my first aid gear. And this Brazilian guy, he's one of the fishermen who came up there. He wasn't really indigenous. He was just a bushman. His hands just full of blood. And we were like, oh my God, what happened? What happened? And next thing I know, Alberto's like, this dummy, I caught myself that time. This dummy was holding on to one piranha while taking another piranha off of the hook, and it bit him and laid him right open, like a big flap on the side. And so I had to mess around with all my, dorky gringo first aid stuff to fix up his hand. And that really showed me. I was like, aren't you supposed to be like the super fisherman on the trip? He's like, yeah, this is a Monday. And I was like, oh, okay. But really, really blew my mind. So it really teaches you a lot with knives as well, chopping with axes. If you get too cocky, the blade will really let you know really quick. And especially with knives, as far as bushcraft goes, this is arguably one of the more dangerous tools out there, Taylor, because it has such a long cutting edge. And even the indigenous down in South America, just depending on what region you're at, they'll only sharpen just the end so that they can grab this and use it for cutting and things along that line. They consider a fully sharpened machete to be like a carpenter's machete, or even in some cases a more dangerous machete because of that. So I've learned a lot from them. So definitely.
It's a territory thing. You
Yeah.
play with sharp stuff, you're going to get cut.
That's true too. I mean, how many cabinet or woodworkers do you know that have, 9 fingers? Somehow I'm going to really screw myself up, internet, but somehow I still have at age 40, all my digits so far, and all my feet digits too.
Your feet digits.
Yeah.
So one of our friends, Mark Hopper.
Oh, Mark Hopper.
Hammer.
What an amazing dude.
He's awesome. But at one of our campouts, he's talking about getting burned in his shop. And he's like, the best way to handle that is forget the first aid stuff, go over to the grinder bucket and just dip it in. So ever since then, whenever I get cut in the shop, I put my cut area in the grinder bucket.
In the grinder, but with all the metal?
The metal shavings. And he said it's
like a coagulant, guys.
Coagulant, but it helps. And I thought it was just crazy. But I've done it, and I'm assuming it's all the iron in the water.
That makes sense.
From the grinder shavings that helps like quick heal and stop the bleeding. But I thought it was crazy, but it works. Don't listen to that. Don't try this at home.
This isn't a first aid talk, but a lot of powders, I don't think this is an actual term, but hypercoagulate. They coagulate, which makes the blood clot a lot better. Black pepper, that's a really good coagulant. If you get caught, you should try that next time. If you want to wake up real quick, use red pepper, because putting that on a cut sucks.
Someone at the store told me recently, this is like an old folklore thing, that if you get cut really bad or like a gunshot wound or anything, dangerous, you put cayenne pepper in water and drink it, and it'll immediately like slow the bleeding, and it might save your life.
Or just give you enough heartburn that you don't feel feelings anymore. Mark Hopper, a little bit about this guy, Goat and Hammer. He actually did a lot of stuff with indigenous, I believe, in South Africa.
Yep.
And you talk, and he was on Forged in Fire too, I think.
He was.
Yeah.
I think twice.
Yeah, I think he won it or something. He made this beautiful, huge blade. But the dude, of course, us Americans, it sounds like he has an English accent. He does, but he's South African. So, and he's a mutt. And he'll tell you that too. He's a mix of a lot of different cultures, but he is quite the dude to learn from. You should have him up at Ridge Runner sometime.
Absolutely,
man.
He's got a school down there. They're building a new building for that.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool. All right, if you were going to give one piece of advice to someone starting into bushcraft, what would it be?
Don't go into it to make money.
Fair enough.
But also with bushcraft, and I'm probably the antithesis of this. So that not the person listened to, but there's a term out there, a saying called "It's not the bow, it's the archer." So no matter how cool of a knife you have, no matter how expensive you've purchased this wonderful wax canvas thing, there's somebody out there with a broken butcher knife who can do 3 times better of a job. And I know that for sure because I met some of them. They're like 5 years old. So you don't have to go crazy into trying to invest a lot of money into it. You can go to Ridge Runner or any of these places and get a very inexpensive knife and start out and really get your teeth cut, or whatever the term is. You can get experience just using that knife a lot more than if you went and bought like 50 other things. And that way you develop a skill set a lot more rather than just the gear. And this is coming from a bushcraft gear guy, which I have tons of. But, just working and carving a lot and really getting comfortable out in the bush is definitely a way to do it. You can get by with a $40 tent better than you can a North Face $3,000 tent and still do an incredible amount of bushcraft without having to pay $400 for a tarp or $300 for this special Fial Raven pants or something like that, which are, worth it. But you can get by, doing a lot with a lot less. As long as you go to Ridge Runner and buy all the stuff.
I think we should do a budget bushcraft series soon. I think a great
dumpster diving bushcraft too.
Dumpster diving bushcraft. I think a great starter knife for someone getting into the bushcraft is the pterosaur.
Yeah.
I mean, it's tough. It's
lifetime warranty.
$2.95, or go with the stainless 14 C28M.
Yeah, that one's a little bit more expensive though,
but it's still a really budget friendly knife.
Yeah.
I mean, I think under $100 in my opinion is a budget friendly thing.
There are a slew of, and of course I can sit here and talk about my knives all day and I want to, but there are a slew of great knives out there, even American made, under $100 that you can find. And the cool part, what I really like about going to like Ridge Runner is you get to see like everything out there, and you can really like learn about what speaks to you about a knife. I like this one because it has yellow in it, or I like this one because it's made of H2 or some steel because you want to go diving in the river.
Magna cut.
Or
tons of options.
Or you just want to get that $10 Mora or something like that and still be able to.
$10 Mora is a killer piece.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is another cool one. What's the name of this again?
Trog.
The Trog. This is like the pterosaur here. But a little bit flashier and a little bit more of a point to it. And this is the injection molded sheath we talked about too.
So when I, a little bit more about design, when I presented this to Condor, I might have said this in part one, but I gave them a whole slew of different blade ideas for that handle. And I think that was a really cool part about designing, was to figure out what could fit into there. And one of them was this flint finish style.
I love this.
Yeah. Well, you do a lot of flint finishes on the end of your grinder.
Flint knife.
Yeah. It's so cool. And of course, if you're batoning, it takes away surface area, makes it baton quicker. And it's not necessarily a term. You might be able to, I just created the gimmick, but Trog is short for troglodyte, which means cave dweller. And some people wanted the more pointy version of a pterosaur. This is made out of 1095, which is a very forgiving steel. Definitely coming back to that question, if you're getting into bushcrafting, it's definitely worth it to use a carbon steel blade to learn how to sharpen. And that can be something like a old hickory knife even. But then it feels like, I don't know, you're not there for like 3 hours. You're actually getting somewhere.
Yeah.
Like doing something on the blade instead of like, well, I've been there with my Benchmade for like 2 hours on this stone and I'm still not getting anywhere. Carbon steel's forgiving and it helps you get a little bit more self-confidence when you're
learning to sharpen.
Yeah. And even with axes and stuff too, it's a very, very important point. When you get a knife that shows you how to teach that skill, then you get the whole cat in the bag there.
All right. Final question. If you were stranded on an island, what 4 specific items would you want to have with you?
Okay. I'm going to try and not get technical. What kind of island are we talking about here? And then, all that stuff too. I would want a piece of cordage, a style of cordage, because I don't know if on the island I could make it out of coconut fibers or whatnot. I would like a large chopper. That could be an axe or a machete. We'll keep that really big up there because we got an axe guy here and an absolute machete nut here as well. But you'd want to have, in some instances, a way to chop down trees to make shelter. That could be with a machete or an axe, or you'd want to open up a coconut or various sea animals. Some of them need to be cracked open like conchs with something. A small carving blade So that's what,
That's
3. And then let's say it's a deserted island. I would want some type of cover to keep away from the sun, because having done the deserted island thing, actually at Bear Island here in North Carolina, it sucks being in exposed sun on a beach if you don't have a choice. For a long amount of time, you can use a tarp when it rains to collect water. You can, you can dry out the tarp and get the salt, or dry out salt water on it and get the salt from the bottom of that and use that to salt your fish. So there's a lot of things you can do with like a tarp. With that in cordage, the cordage I could use and make a spear, or make a fishing line, or use that to help with my shelters, or, in some cases do all that. But the chopping tool, I think, is probably the most important, because I actually learned this from Essie Knives. If you throw a lot of green plants, green trees, green bushes, all on a fire, it puts a huge plume of smoke out. So let's say you hear a search play in the distance. You can have all that green stuff ready, and you had to use a large cutting tool, chopping tool, to get all that. You have all that on the side by your fire, and you're ready to go. I didn't put in there a fire making device.
Notice that.
Yeah, just because hopefully, knocking on wood, I'm confident enough to get a fire started somehow on my own. But when you have to, it sucks, and it's a pain in the butt. However, I can still get by eating raw fish, sushi.
Yeah.
I can't get by without water, and that's where the tarp comes in. Use it for collecting water. That'd be my choice. Going back on it, I probably should have put a fire starter in there, guys. But doing a bow drill, doing a fire plow, which sucks. It's so hard. Or some of these other methods might be a way, but the fire is important. But there are ways to get around that. I wish I would have put a fire starter in my kit now, but I'm going to go ahead and say the cordage is most important, because I can use the cordage to make a bow drill or catch a fish. That's my thoughts. Yes, guys. Yes, internet. I wish I put a fire steel in there, but there, I said it.
All right. Well, that's a wrap, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks to Blue Ridge Ranch again for letting us film here. Joe Flowers, Bushcraft Global, Condor Knives, Ridge Runner Blades. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook. Hit the like and subscribe button, and stay tuned for more, guys.